The sun hung low over the desolate stretch of Dust Creek, its dying light spilling over the cracked earth and weather-beaten buildings like liquid gold. A lone stagecoach rumbled down the dirt road, wheels creaking, dust rising behind it like smoke from a dying fire. When it came to a stop in front of the general store, a young woman stepped down, clutching a small, worn satchel to her chest. Her name was Clara Hayes, and she looked like she'd been through more miles of hardship than any map could show. Her boots were scuffed, her skirt travel-stained, and yet her chin stayed lifted, her hazel eyes sharp with a stubbornness that refused to bend. She had left Dallas 3 days ago, her last few coins spent on a coach ticket that bought her nothing but sore feet and a world of uncertainty. Her father's farm had died 2 summers ago, swallowed by drought, and her mother's passing soon after had taken the last bit of warmth from her life. Now, with nothing but determination and desperation to her name, Clara had come to Dust Creek chasing a rumor that the Hollow Ranch was hiring. The town was small and quiet, the kind of place where everyone noticed a stranger before she even opened her mouth. Men leaned against posts outside the saloon, watching her with curious, assessing eyes. A couple of women in bonnets paused their gossip to whisper. Clara ignored them all and walked on, her step steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. She followed the dusty road out toward the edge of town, where the land stretched wide and wild, and a large corral came into view. Several ranch hands worked there, repairing fences and feeding horses, the sound of hammers and whinnies filling the hot air. Among them stood a tall man with a presence that seemed to command the ground he walked on. He wore a weathered brown hat, a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, and a leather belt that carried the dust of hard labor. His eyes, when they lifted to meet hers, were a shade of gray that reminded her of rain she hadn't seen in years. "You're the boss here?" she asked, stopping a few feet away, her voice firm but cautious. The man studied her, then tipped his hat slightly. "That's right. Caleb Ryder, owner of Hollow Ranch. What can I do for you, miss?" Clara gripped her satchel tighter, forcing confidence into her voice. "I heard you might be looking for hands. I can ride, rope, mend fence, and work stock. I'll do whatever's needed." Caleb's expression didn't change, though his eyes flicked briefly to her boots, her hands, her determined face. "You've worked a ranch before?" "Grew up on one. Till the drought took it," she said quietly. "I just need work, Mr. Ryder. Anything to earn my keep." He looked down for a long moment, the silence stretching thin between them. "Finally," he said, "already got all the hands I need." The rejection hit her like a hard wind. She swallowed, tried again. "Then maybe there's something else. Housework, cookin', cleanin'. I'll take half pay. If I have to." Caleb crossed his arms, watching her with that unreadable calm. There was something behind his eyes, something heavier than indifference. "Why come all the way here for work?" "Because there's nowhere else to go," she admitted, her voice cracking just slightly. "And I don't take charity." He seemed to weigh her words, then exhaled slowly. "There might be one job open," he said finally, his tone low and careful. Hope flickered in her chest. "I'll take it." "Hold on," he said. "You haven't heard the terms yet." Her brows knit together. "What kind of terms?" Caleb's gray eyes held hers with unnerving steadiness. "You'll get room, food, and a fair wage. But I'll only hire you on one condition." He paused, his next words landing like thunder. "You marry me. By sunset." Clara blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I what?" He didn't smile, didn't flinch. "You heard me. I need a wife before sundown." She stared at him in disbelief, her pulse hammering in her ears. "That's ridiculous. You don't even know me." "I don't have time to," he said simply. "If I'm not married by sundown, this ranch, everything my father built, gets signed over to my cousin. It's written plain in the will. And today's my 30th birthday." He looked away, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "I ain't got anyone else I'd ask. You need work, and I need a wife. Guess we could help each other out." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She'd met strange men before, but this one wasn't mad, just desperate in a way she understood all too well. The thought of marrying a stranger was unthinkable, and yet, the sun was already beginning to dip, the town too small to find another opportunity before nightfall. Her money was gone. Her pride, though battered, couldn't feed her. "What happens if I say no?" she asked quietly. "Then you ride on," Caleb said, his voice calm but heavy. "And you'll be sleepin' under the stars tonight." For a long moment, she said nothing. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of sage and dust. She looked at the sky bright gold now, slipping toward orange, and thought about the miles she'd walked, the doors that had closed, the hunger that waited. Finally, she looked back at him. "You really mean it, don't you?" He gave the faintest nod. "I don't make jokes, Miss Hayes." She exhaled slowly, her heart beat loud as thunder in her ears. Maybe life had brought her here for a reason she couldn't see yet. Maybe this wild, reckless bargain was her only chance at something new. And as the sun sank lower on the horizon, Clara realized that before the day was done, she'd either be a wife or a ghost in the desert dust. The news traveled faster than wildfire through the quiet streets of Dust Creek. By the time the clock struck 5, everyone in town had heard that the mysterious girl from the stagecoach and the silent cowboy from Hollow Ranch were to be wed before the sun went down. Inside the small clapboard chapel at the edge of town, Clara Hayes stood in front of a cracked mirror, adjusting the borrowed white dress the preacher's wife had pulled from an old trunk. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and dust, but to Clara it felt like armor, thin as it was. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to fasten the last button. She could hardly believe the hours that had passed. At noon she'd been begging for work, now she was about to marry a man whose name she'd only learned that afternoon. Caleb Ryder waited outside, speaking in low tones to the preacher, his hat clutched in his hand, his expression unreadable except for the faint crease between his brows. When he looked up and caught her watching, he gave the smallest nod, steady, certain, a promise that whatever came, he meant what he said. The ceremony was small, almost secret. The preacher's wife stood as witness, and one of Caleb's ranch hands, a grizzled man named Tom, removed his hat respectfully when the vows began. Clara's heart thudded so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. When the preacher asked if she took Caleb Ryder as her lawful husband, she hesitated, just for a breath, before forcing the words past her lips. "I do," she whispered. Caleb's reply came deep and sure, "I do." And just like that, with the setting sun streaming through the dusty chapel window and the faint creak of the floorboards beneath their feet, two strangers became husband and wife. There were no rings, no music, no smiles, only the quiet weight of a promise neither truly understood. When they stepped outside, the horizon was aflame. The sky burned orange and pink, streaked with gold, and the wind carried the scent of hay and wild sage. For a long moment they stood side by side, saying nothing, just staring out at the land that bound their fates together. "Didn't think you'd actually go through with it," Caleb said softly, his tone somewhere between surprise and respect. Clara gave a small, nervous laugh. "Neither did I." They mounted his horse, she rode side saddle behind him, clutching his coat as they rode through the cooling air toward the ranch. The town faded behind them, replaced by open fields and the first glimmer of evening stars. Hollow Ranch looked different now, less like a place of labor, more like the edge of a new life she hadn't asked for. The men tipped their hats as they passed, whispers following in their wake. Inside the house, Caleb lit a lantern, its warm glow spreading across the worn wooden walls. "This place is yours now, too," he said quietly. "At least for as long as you want it." Clara set down her satchel on the floorboards, feeling an ache rise in her chest. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Caleb hesitated, then met her gaze. "Now you get a meal, some rest, and a fair wage. You've got a roof and work if you want it. I won't ask you for anything more than that." His voice was rough around the edges but honest, and for the first time since she'd met him, Clara saw the kindness that hid beneath his hardened calm. The next morning, the sun spilled through the windows, and the smell of coffee filled the small kitchen. Clara found Caleb already outside, working the corral, his shirt damp with sweat, his movements steady and sure. She stood on the porch watching him, and something stirred inside her, not love, not yet, but a fragile respect that felt dangerously close. Days turned into weeks, and the strangeness of their union softened into routine. Clara worked alongside the men, learned the rhythm of the ranch, and earned her place among them. Caleb treated her with quiet courtesy, never crossing a line, never speaking more than needed, but sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her with a look that made her pulse stumble. One evening, about 3 weeks after the wedding, a storm rolled across Dust Creek, drenching the land in long-awaited rain. They took shelter together in the barn, listening to the thunder rumble through the hills. "You ever think about leaving?" Caleb asked suddenly, his voice barely audible over the rain. Clara turned toward him, water dripping from her hair. "I used to," she said softly. "But maybe running isn't the answer anymore." He studied her face for a long moment before nodding. "Reckon I know what you mean." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was thick with something unspoken, something real. When the storm finally passed, the air smelled clean, and the stars came out brighter than before. They walked outside together, the wet earth glistening under their boots. Caleb looked up at the sky, then at her. "You changed this place," he said simply. "Didn't think one day could make such a difference." Clara smiled faintly, her heart catching in her throat. "Guess we both changed something," she whispered. He reached out then, hesitating for just a second before taking her hand, rough, warm, steady. The contact sent a shiver through her, not of fear but of something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. And there, under the vast Texas sky still damp from rain, Clara Hayes Ryder realized that sometimes fate doesn't arrive dressed in miracles or dreams. Sometimes it rides up dusty roads, wearing a cowboy's hat and a quiet kind of hope. She had asked for a job and found herself a husband, a home, and perhaps, if she dared to let her heart believe it, the beginning of a love that might one day feel like destiny. As the last of the clouds drifted away and the moon rose silver over the ranch, Caleb squeezed her hand gently and said, "Looks like the sun finally set on both our loneliness." And for the first time in a long time, Clara smiled without hesitation, knowing that though she hadn't